So, hello everyone, good morning. This is the Northeastern University Game Speaker Series, and this is our first session today. My name is Nathalie Mathe. I'm professor with Northeastern University Game Science and Design Master Program in Oakland, and the host today is Celia Pearce, who is professor of game design in Boston, and our wonderful host is Tracy Fullerton, professor at the USC School of Cinematics Arts. So welcome. I will post some information, some links in the chat about our programs. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalie. I'm Celia Pearce. For those who don't know me, I am a professor in the game design program at Northeastern. I'm extremely excited to have Tracy, who agreed to do this on very short notice, a very dear old friend and collaborator, and really excited about this new book that she's going to be talking about. Uh, Tracy is the author of Game Design Workshop, which, if you've ever taken any undergraduate classes, you have to take. It's a requirement for all undergraduate majors here. It's in our foundations class, it's the core textbook that we use. So, if any of my students are here from my class, this is the one we're working with. But also, she's a phenomenal game designer. She has a couple of really fantastic, highly acclaimed award winning games, including The Night Journey, which she created with Bill Viola, the video game artist, and also Walden, which is a book based on the Thoreau novel. And she's been involved in building USC into the top games program in the world, really, at this point. So please help me welcome her, talking about her new book, The Well Read Game.
Thanks, Celia. Thanks, Natalie. That's really lovely. And thank you for the intro. I'll try not to repeat what you've said, 'cause I have a little intro myself. As Celia mentioned, I'm a game designer, experimental game designer, and I work at USC. And my research lab, the Game Innovation Lab, um, is, I guess, one of the earlier established places where we focus on the notion of pushing the boundaries of games in innovative ways. I also sit on the board of directors for Games for Change, the board of directors for Square Enix, and I am that game advisor for that game company. Um, Before I came to academia, I worked in the commercial game industry doing just a little bit of everything, large scale immersive projects, interactive television games, massively multiplayer casual games, etc. But when I came to academia and I began the Game Innovation Lab, my focus shifted to really my roots. Which were in experimental filmmaking when I was in school. And I really went back to thinking about uh, how we could build processes and how we could build foundations of design communities where game innovation could really be pushed forward. A lot of the innovation that we've done at the lab has led to um, uh, new games being released into the industry, games like Flow and the games from that game company, the Darfur is Dying, one of the early games for change. Sorry, you might hear my cat. She's very insistent that she be part of it, so she says hello. Um, and a number of other types of alternate reality games, VR games, etc. Uh, so uh, the way that we do this, the way that we push these games forward, Celia already mentioned my own games, The Night Journey and Walden. The way that we do this is we push these games forward is using this method of play-centric design from my first book, which is a handbook for game designers, meant to be um, uh, followed along as in a series of exercises. You can teach yourself game design. As I implemented this book and brought this book to different workshops and classrooms for the uh, 20, 20 years. It's a Is it 20 years? Yeah, it's a lot of years. For the many, many years that I've been teaching game design, one of the methods that we used was what we call playing aloud, right? So thinking aloud about what the player is feeling, what the player is thinking. And a lot of this, I start to learn about how players think about their play as I listen to these play alouds. And that's sort of in a lot of ways, the basis of the book that I have recently written with Matt Farber, which is called The Well-Read Game, as Celia mentioned. Okay, Elle, you can come, but you have to sit over here. Okay. So The Well-Read Game is not a handbook about game design. So it's a real, it's a different kind of book for me. It's a book about the experiences that players have when we play games. So not the outcomes, like whether we win or lose, or the aesthetics of the formal game structures, but the ephemeral and emotional experiences of being in play. All players have these experiences, though we rarely discuss them. And these are those private stories that we tell ourselves as we play, what questions we ask, our reactions to the game's intent. And in the book, we call these experiences reading because they involve so many of the same inherent aspects of engaging with literary, cinematic, and other expressive text. I gotta put you down. I know. I gotta put her down. I need my hands. Sorry, folks. Um, Sorry, I need my hands because I actually have to read from the book. So the introduction to the book begins with a quote from a 15-year-old player of the game Journey by that game company. She says, "We had this experience where we would play with people and not know who they were and still have a profound connection with them. Toward the end of the game, it suddenly gets really cold and icy, and it becomes really difficult to progress. Eventually, your character sort of gives up. You can't go on any longer. And at that point, my dad and I thought it might have been the end of the game. It was sort of a sad ending until minutes later, the game comes back up and you're at your goal. You're at this beautiful mountaintop filled with all the creatures you've seen in the world below. And it's this beautiful example of the end, and that it doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think that that gave my dad some kind of peace because near the end of his life, he was playing a game that told him that in the end, it would be all right. It was a few weeks after he passed that I realized this journey within the game, it reflected the journey I was going on with my dad." So, mind you, this is a 15-year-old player. This is the mountaintop she's talking about. It's a 15-year-old player who's discussing, reflecting on her feelings as she plays this game with her father as he is passing away. I'll come back to that, but I want to talk about what happens. We know what happens. We have a lot of experience in thinking about what happens when we do something like reading. When we read, this is a wonderful picture that we got from Lawrence Musgrove, who is a literacy professor and illustrator. And he asked all his students to draw pictures of what they thought happened when they read. What was the sort of process of understanding? And then he sort of collated them, sort of amalgamated them into this very simple, I think, really effective sketch, what happens when we read. And what he's showing is a visualization of something, a theory called reader response, right? Where we have the text, we have the reader, and it's cute, they're kind of shaking hands. And then we have the response. This is, uh, it sounds commonsensical, but it is something that is generated from the meeting of the reader and the text. This idea that there is this ephemeral event that is generated when a particular reader comes to a particular text at a particular time. And we can draw something very similar for games. It's a little bit more complicated, I think, because uh, the nature of games and play. But we actually, after discussing our ideas about player response with Lawrence, he drew us a similar kind of picture. And what we have here in this picture, what happens when we play is we have this notion of the player shaking hands with the game, represented by a cute little controller. And the game is having a response, which is something we talk about a lot in game design. The game is kind of talking to the player in in game language, so you speak. So we have the button, and the game is really thinking about its own systems, right? And the player is also thinking about those systems. That's why there's a picture of the button in the player's mind. So these are the things that we generally talk about when we talk about how we play games. We talk about the systems of play. And so both the game and the player are communicating in that language of systemic play. But the player who's carrying a bag, which represents all of the things that make us who we are, that multifaceted individual, our cultural context, our social context, the moment we actually pick up this game to play, the player is also responding with their emotions and their critical thoughts, which is a sort of heart and jewel. And this is what's important to us. We think that we need to talk more about the heart and the jewel, the really the lovely things that emerge when a player brings their self, their own self, to play. So this is aligned with, as I mentioned before, reader response theory in literary theory. This is Louise Rosenblatt, who's quite famous for articulating reader response theory. And this is her quote. She says, "Text is just ink on a page until a reader comes along and gives it life." And I feel very similarly, I've always have, about games. You know, we sort of fetishize games. We say, oh, the artwork, oh, the software, the frame rate, etc. But these are just the pieces of the game. You know, in the same way that the little tokens on a board game are just the pieces of play. They are not the game itself. And they have no life until a player comes with their mind and their heart and their activity, and they give it life. So you could amend this quote and make it meaningful for players as well. This is similar to what Brian Upton, who wrote the book Situational Game Design, describes when he talks about how he thinks about games and play. And I've been very influenced by Brian's work as well. Brian articulates something that I think is very important. So in modern game design, we often talk about the player and the game as separate things, separate entities. And he calls this the sort of traditional transactional model of games, where we have a player, we have a game, they interact, and then play is created. And this is a very typical way of thinking about it. So it's a very cybernetic way of thinking about it, that these are separate entities. But what Brian posits in his book, Situational Game Design, is that there's actually more to it than that. He posits that there's the player, and then what he calls the rules. So all of those artifacts of play are inherent in the rules. There's still that transaction between the player and the rules, but he thinks of play as something that is occurring within the player, in their mind, their heart, their being, right? And the game as something that encompasses both the play of the player, the transaction, and the rules, that it is a meta concept that only occurs when the player engages with the rules. And only then does the game event actually become apparent, right? Otherwise, it is an inert object. He goes further to talk about what he calls the game as designed. So this is what the all of us game designers think of. We think this is what we have built. The game as experienced, which is how the game is actually played. So as we all know, games often have many ways that you can play them. So there's the game as designed, the game as experienced, and then the game as understood. And he focuses strongly on the game as understood. And this points to the same kind of idea as my diagram of what happens when we play. The game is understood is really the most compelling and interesting part of this. It's not something that can be controlled by the game designer, because the game is understood includes all of those multifaceted aspects of an individual who has come to this event of play, all of the things that they bring with with them, all of the things that happen to them in the game, and all of their reflections and ideas that occur. Um, this aligns also very strongly, and Celia and I were just actually discussing Bernie before we started this. This aligns very strongly with Bernie, uh, work of Bernie DeKoven and his well-played game, A Player's Philosophy, where he talks about the game is something that is not to judge us. It's not here to uh, yes, thank you. Yes, Bernie Coven so missed is in the chat. Yes. Um, the sorry, got distracted by thinking about Bernie. Uh, the game is not something that's here to judge us, but something that is here to be to almost to unlock us, right? That it is a holistic experience, and that something that is well played is not something that is won per se, but is something that is experienced in a way that makes us whole and healthy. And of course, this is where we get the title of our book. The Well-Read Game is a pun on Bernie's title, and of course, Bernie was a lover of puns, so we thought he would enjoy that. This all comes together in the idea of a new theory of player response. So I want to give an example. I've read you an example from a young Journey player, but I want to actually look at a game that I think is kind of proves the concept a little bit more easily. A game like Journey is meant to make you feel a certain way. Now let's read a very, very simple game, a game that in fact, in many ways would be meaningless unless we are reading it. This is a game called Unpacking, and I'm sure many people here have played Unpacking. It's a very simple puzzle game where you essentially are faced with a number of rooms and boxes, and you click on the boxes and take objects out and put them away in a room. If you do not read the objects, then that's all you do. You are simply clicking, clicking, placing, and you have to find enough room for everything in each room. The only way this game works and becomes meaningful is if you are reading those objects and what they might mean to the person who owns them. And so I find this game fascinating because it's like a trust fall with the player. If the player is not bringing themselves aesthetically to read this game, there is no game. There's just clicking and placing. And the creators of this game know that's not the case. So the game itself is actually really quite meaningful, and each level is unveils a sort of moment in a character's life. So, for example, this is the first level, and as we unpack it, it's a young child's room, and at the very end, we get this little journal entry that says, "Finally, my own room." It's the room. It's a room that uh, uh, could belong to any child in sort of the 1990s. But here's what I journaled when I played this game. So I immediately find it nostalgic. The first level is set in 1997, and I recognize the iconic toys in the character's room, a Tamagotchi and a Game Boy, for example. I'm not certain about the character's gender, but I guess maybe they are a girl. She likes art and has a lot of art supplies, and she likes gaming, both physical and digital. She has board games and a soccer ball along with her Game Boy. Everything in her room is colorful and upbeat. She seems like a happy kid. She has a journal, so she might be a little introspective too. I try making her room messy, putting all her toys on the floor, but the game highlights them in red. So I realize that there is a bit of constraint here. I can't place the toys in creative ways around the room. I can't just toss them on the floor. I feel like that is an interesting choice, almost like the game is enforcing her parents' rules about keeping your room clean. After I've unpacked everything in the first level and put the toys away, I see a picture of my/her room in my photo album with a caption from the character, "Finally, my own room." It is the tiniest bit of narrative, but I feel like I have helped this young person establish themselves and their identity in their first private space. So this is just a very simple little game. It does go on and become more complex, and I, of course, don't want to spoil it for you. But there's some really interesting things that emerge, some complex story moments that emerge from just the act of reading these objects. So later on, this is what is sort of colloquially referred to as the boyfriend level. The character unpacks into an apartment clearly with a new partner. And the partner uh, is, uh, we assume, male from some of the items there. But I want to read what I journaled because it's a really interesting relationship that is detailed by the objects' relationship to each other, not just his objects and her objects, but their relationship to each other. So it says, the game goes on to later levels and the unpacking continues. At the start of every level, I'm faced with a mountain of boxes and empty spaces to fill with her stuff. I start to see the same stuff over and over, and I know where it goes now. It almost begins to feel like my own stuff. It's so recognizable. My character is obviously one who hangs on to childhood things, and I keep unpacking the stuffed animals, clearly, a clearly loved stuffed pig well into adulthood. That pig and the rest of the brightly colored stuff becomes her trademark in the spaces she shares, first with roommates and then with a boyfriend who apparently wears and likes only black and gray. The boyfriend level is a challenge from the outset. She has boxes with games, and those go well with his games, but she also has a bunch of brightly colored clothes, underwear, shoes, and so on that just won't fit in his closet and drawers. He hasn't even moved any of his stuff to make room for hers. His apartment is full of his own stuff, and just trying to find some kind of niche to place her colorful, joyful things is a challenge. I sense a disaster in this relationship from the outset. What made her think she should move in with him? This level is so hard because though I can tidy up his closet and make room for her clothes, you can't move his wall hangings. It seems like he is pretty particular about his art, and so, no matter how hard I try, there is no place for me to hang up her diploma. In the end, I have to shove it under the bed to finish unpacking this level. This is one of the most dramatic, unfortunate moments in the character's life so far. When I put that diploma under the bed, I just feel so bad for her. I know she doesn't belong here. So, this is so fascinating to me because I'm able to read a disaster in the making of this relationship simply by the nature of the stuff that I'm unpacking. Nothing has changed in the mechanics of this game, nothing has changed systemically. The only thing that has changed is my understanding of each of those objects that I'm taking out of those boxes and putting on those shelves. And so it's a fascinating thing, and I'm able to understand a very deep and interesting character and situation with uh, by bringing my own understanding of what these objects are. Now, Matt Farber, my co-author, played this game with his young son. And the interesting thing here is that they had actually moved several times um, uh, before they were playing this game. So his young son um, had experience with unpacking because they had had to do this a lot with their own stuff. And they played it together. They played it in a kind of co-play situation where they were talking about what the objects were, things that his son didn't recognize. And it was a kind of a really nice intergenerational opportunity to talk about the character and what was emerging and all the different objects that were in the character's home versus their own home. And Matt journaled their experience, which was different than mine. The bedroom looks a bit like yours, he commented to his son, who's the one actually playing the game. Matt was sitting next to him on the couch, making suggestions as he plays. And I'm going to read this from Matt's point of view because it's easier. We recently moved multiple times when I took a professorship opportunity across the country, first to an apartment, then to a house. I watch as he, his son, methodically clicks the boxes and then puts items in drawers, shelves, closets, as he did in his own bedroom. As we play more, he remarks to me that each room seems to have one item that does not belong, like a computer keyboard mixed in with the kitchen spices. That didn't happen when we moved, he said. Mom labeled all the boxes by room. As he continues to unbox and unpack, my mind wanders. I think about the unwitting trauma that my career opportunities might have inflicted on my family, who had to pack and move. In my childhood, we never moved. I always went to the same school and woke up in the same bedroom. My son has moved twice already, each time to a new bedroom, a new neighborhood, a new school. As he unpacks, we hope that he too unboxes a better life. So, if we start to think about this little game and the way that it is allowing both me and Matt and his son to have different readings of it, we each are experiencing the character that was intended by the creators, but we have also brought our own understandings, our own life experiences to those readings. Um, it's a fascinating way that is similar to the way that we, of course, read books. Um, when we read books, we can think of them as mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. This is uh, a metaphor proposed by Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop, where she talks about children's literature and the sort of liminal boundaries of books. And her influential essay on mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors describes the way in which, when we read, we see ourselves reflected in the worlds and characters of books and immersed in their narratives. We can either see ourselves reflected in their experiences, we can learn about other people and places and things, or we can enter the book world through our imagination. Um, when Matt and his son and I experienced the character and situation of unpacking, in some ways we saw ourselves. In other ways, we were learning about other people. And we were entering the world of this character through our imagination in a very similar way to the way that we do with uh, traditional literature. Now, one of the interesting things about games is that we're, of course, not taught that this is what we're supposed to do with them. We're taught that we're supposed to win them. We're taught that we are supposed to talk about their incredible features, that we're supposed to talk about their action and their chances for sort of competitiveness. Uh, when we are taught about literature as children, we are taught to see ourselves. We are given discussion questions, and we are made to realize that this is what literature is for, that literature is meant to reflect ourselves, that we're meant to learn about other people and places, and that we're meant to use our imagination to enter their worlds. There's a kind of scaffolding in early children's literature that brings us from simple stories to more complex stories, where we're able to do this quite well until we get to adult stories, and that is the entire point of adult literature, where we understand that that is why we are engaging with them. But where is that scaffolding in games? We were looking for that. We found some really interesting examples. Here's an example of a game that we felt scaffolded the player quite well from simple gameplay into understanding the characters, reflecting on them, um, uh, finding ourselves and others in them, and entering their imaginary worlds. This is a game called Lost Words, where we thought that the scaffolding was really easy to see, and made a great example for this. So in Lost Words, its basic gameplay is that it's a platformer, and it has two modes of play. The first is you platform as a little character along the sentences of a journal. This journal belongs to Izzy. Her grandmother gave her the journal because she's a creative kid. She likes to write, and she has a great relationship with her grandmother. And so her grandmother says, writers write, so go ahead and write. And so she does. And what we do is we move our character along these lines as she writes them, and we read them. Um, as she writes, she begins to write a story of a wonderful, fantastical world. And that world is also a platformer. And at certain times, we actually dive into the journal and we go into the depths of her imagination. We follow her into her world, her storybook world, where the characters are different, but reflective of the things that are going on in Izzy's own personal life. So as a player, we begin to make the connections between what is written on the page and what is being played in the game. And it's a wonderful scaffolding. And what Izzy is going through is actually quite sad and difficult. There's a lot of difficult and strong emotions that are being expressed. Her grandmother has a stroke, and her parents are struggling. And of course, Izzy and her brother are struggling as well. So I'm going to play just a little bit of the game. Get this to go.
Hello, Journal. We went to see Gran today, in the hospital. It looked like a big grey fortress. It took us a while to find the right room. Dad let me open the door. Gran has a big, cozy bed at home. Nothing like the hospital one she was in. Lying in there, she looked so small. I don't remember her being that small. Gran's eyes were open, but she struggled to find the right words. She just couldn't. Speak properly. The doctor said it was called dysphasia. It was caused by the stroke. She's usually so talkative, but now she kept stopping. Mid-sentence, as if all the words she could find were just out of reach. I could see it really frustrating her. And then Gran started coughing. They put an oxygen mask on her. I told her she looked like Darth Gran. She smiled at that.
So I'm going to skip the next clip for time, but eventually, of course, Gran gets worse. I don't think I'm spoiling anything there. I think you probably all intuited that. And Izzy gets very angry and frustrated at what's happening. And as she does, she writes in her journal about this, but she also writes in her storybook. And that storybook is the game world that we go in and play. For example, as she sort of dives down into this lava-filled these caverns, she winds up facing this massive giant fire woman who screams at her in rage. Of course, it's a manifestation of her own rage, and she realizes that in order to face this fire woman, there's really actually only one way, and that's with compassion. And when she finally shows, she tries to fight the fire woman, but she can't win. And when she finally shows compassion to this giant fire woman, it shrinks down into a tiny, eensy weensy little flame that then becomes her companion, which is just a really beautiful metaphor for the way that when we confront difficult emotions uh, uh, with a kind of grace, that they become something that never disappears but can travel with us and become a part of our character. And it's a really beautiful way to show that in a game. You have to, of course, read it that way. You have to actually interpret it that way. And you may have some other reasons. You may have grief in your own life that you're looking back to. You may may be specific instances. For example, when I was playing this game, I was thinking about my father's passing, and there were moments where I actually had to just sort of stop playing and realize how much this game was calling back particular feelings and moments for me. Just like a book, uh, it was able to tap into uh, those moments for me. And for everyone, it will be different. They will have a different reading, of course. What's interesting is that it's the kind of game that people on the internet are actually, they feel open, they feel permission to talk about their feelings about, which I think is really fascinating because, again, when you look at how we talk about games, we're often talking about their features, their technical aspects. But if you sort of search for this game on the internet, what people are talking about are things like this: crying their eyes out, being at a loss for words, thinking about when their mother passed, etc. They're sharing because they feel open to share. The game itself has given them not only the scaffolding to think and interpret it, but also permission in its way of communicating. One of the ways that we propose in our book to get people to feel that kind of safety to share is not on the internet, where it isn't always safe to share these things, but in a player response journal. So children, when they're being taught to read literature, are often taught to create a reading response journal with prompt questions, and they are given particular things to read that, again, scaffold them into this idea of interpretation of literature. And so we propose that the same kind of thing could be really a wonderful way of getting people to feel more open and feel more permission to think about their own gameplay in this way. So if we were to create, for example, a player response journal, we might ask some prompts like this. Like, what character did you most relate to? What moments stood out to you when you were playing? Do you think you'll remember this experience in a few months or years? And you'll notice that these are very much like the kind of book club questions that we ask when we form a club to discuss literature. Um, so again, I want to skip some things for time here. One of the other ideas that we talk about in getting people to feel safe, and especially, we think the best place to start really is with young readers of games, is in pairing games and text. So again, when we teach literature, we often pair texts so that young readers can uh, use the comparison of two texts as a helpful way of understanding a character's situation and their own situation. If we think about something like Lost Words, it could be paired with a book like The Thing About Jellyfish, right? Which is a book about that also deals with grief and loss. Um, so classically in literature classes, you see pairings of things like Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 with, for example, the students will also watch a movie like Gattaca, right, about dystopias. You might see The Crucible by Arthur Miller paired with Werewolf, right, where we're talking about communities that turn on each other, for example, right? And when we could pair something like Never Alone with a book like How I Survived 4 Nights on the Ice. In my own work, I often think about how the book Walden has been often paired with the movie Into the Wild. And now with my own game, Walden. And so we have two ways of experiencing the same text. So these are all potential ways of thinking about how we can help uh, especially younger readers be scaffolded from thinking about games as something that they just do and then sort of put away and hide all their feelings about into experiences where games can be talked about, can be discussed, where it's okay if they open up ideas that are emotional, ideas that are thoughtful and critical. Um, for example, we could have instead of a literature circle, which is um, a classic way that we create group dialogue around books, we could have a literature circle around games. I actually, when we were writing the book, we were reaching out to people and say, "Oh, do you have game clubs where you talk about games?" And the answer is yes, but often people are talking again about the features or the designs or the systems. They're not necessarily talking about the themes, about the characters, about the worlds, right? And this is for me, this is the difference. And why? Why do we want to do this? Why do we want to make people better readers of games? For me, it's very clear, and it comes back to the work of Louise Rosenblatt and her ideas around reader response theory. For Rosenblatt, she says if she's been concerned about methods of teaching literature and ensuring that it should be personally experienced, she says it's because it helps readers develop the imaginative capacity to put themselves in the place of others, a capacity essential in a democracy where we need to rise above narrow self interest and envision the broader human consequences of political decisions. If I have been involved with the development of the ability to read critically across the whole intellectual spectrum, it is because such abilities are particularly important for citizens in a democracy. For me, this can't be more poignant statement right now. It strikes such a strong chord for me. Games have been said to be the uh, art form of the century, and if that is so, then we must learn to read them. We must use them to become better citizens, to become better people. Um, so I've cut a little bit about, but hopefully what I've cut out will come out in the Q&A. Um, Here is more info on the game. We also we're building toolkits for people to use if they want to create their own game book clubs or bring games into their classrooms. And with that, let me stop sharing so I can actually see folks. And I will. I guess we're opening up for questions. Is that the next thing?
Yes, and I am looking at the text chat to see what we have here. Um, Here we have, let's see, Jonathan. My little brother was in a Pokemon Fire Red Leaf Green book club where they play a little bit each week and journal and share their experiences. And I was so impressed at the profundity of the insights they produced. This reminded me of that.
That's great. I love that. One of the chapters in the book is we actually had written to folks in our community to ask for their game journals, and I had a similar experience where students, friends, colleagues were sending us uh, portions of their game journals, and I was just so thrilled to see, like you say, the profundity of the insights. And as I mentioned, I read that quote in the beginning from the young girl who played Journey with her father, and I just want to point out that's a 15-year-old girl. I mean, this is not that those are really deep insights thinking about the end of life through the lens of a game and feeling I guess feeling that they're able to share those insights, that they um, have permission to share those insights in such a really deep way. So yeah, I agree with that. I think it's it's really exciting to see how profound people's feelings and thoughts about games when they play. They're very ephemeral, though. There's a quote, and I wish I had a marker on it, but there's a quote from Bernie about what he calls the 19th hole of games, which is after we've played, where we go to talk about what happened. And he's like,
Mm-hmm.
it slips away so easily is sort of the gist of the quote. Unless we write it down, unless we talk about it together, these feelings are ephemeral. They slip away from us. So we need to journal them. We need to capture them. Some of the ways that we suggest in the book are also doing our own little like personal let's plays, right? Just using let's play technologies, right? We're recording ourselves. We don't have to put it on the web because it's not really safe these days, but um, uh, certainly not to be feeling in public. Uh, but there are smaller groups, and that's what everyone asks me. It's like, how do you start? And I would say you start sitting on your couch with a trusted friend or family and play out loud with them. Or you start with a journal, or you start with a small literature circle of trusted, friends where you can share. Maybe we can start building a place where we can share things in public again without killing each other, right?
I have oh, here's someone someone who does, this is from Jimena. As someone who does tandem readings between feminist theories and novels, I deeply appreciate this combination that integrates our inner worlds, journaling, and more in-depth conversations.
Thank you. We could just have people share their.
I think they are doing that.
Oh, but I mean, people could just. Feel like they
Yeah,
could just
I
unmute
let
Read
people
their
speak
own
inside.
comments. Yeah,
Oh
if someone
yeah, yeah, yeah.
wants to ask a question
Oh, that's
live,
totally fine. I wasn't sure how you had it set up. I thought, Nat, you had muted everyone. So
they
I'm
can unmute themselves if they want to
Yes,
share
I think
or
so
raise
too.
their hands or whatever.
Because we
Yeah,
could just have a conversation, right?
I had a
yeah.
couple of quick things too that I wanted to ask you or mention and then ask about. Last over the holiday, I was playing a lot of Roblox with my niece. She's really into this game, 99 Nights in the Forest. And at the Thanksgiving dinner, she was talking to us about it, and she said, "The thing I love about this game is you can't really win it if you don't cooperate. It's much easier to win if you work together." And I turned to her dad and I'm like, well, that's a pretty good takeaway from a video game, if you ask me.
Pretty good takeaway. Exactly.
And then
It's
the other thing I wanted to mention was I really noticed with unpacking, which by the way, unpacking, I miss
yes.
it immensely, um, that there's also this other aspect of game, what I would call game literacy, which in that particular game really had a lot to do with spatial storytelling. With the way you were describing reading that space, how it's overly crowded, there's not room for her in that space, her
Yes.
piece can't go on the wall. And since a lot of games are so spatial, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the idea of reading space in games and how we are able to unpack a story from the components and the artifacts in a space and the space itself.
It's a really wonderful comment and question. I I would sort of lean back to how we do this in literature, right? I mean, when we set the scene, um, we are describing the situation of of whatever the drama is, right? So when we it's not even just in literature, it's in every art form, plays and in films, right? We have an establishing shot where we show you, where what the situation is. We show you visually, we show you in terms of what's important by how we've lit the scene, what we point out in the scene. Often the very scene itself will reflect what's going on in the characters, right? It's some throughout the book we talk about different um, uh, game scenes where, for example, like in Life is Strange, there's a massive fire that's going on. I was thinking of Before the Storm, the prequel game. There's a massive fire that's burning throughout the end, from the end of the first episode through the last episode, and that fire is representing the you know, the angst and the conflict that's at the heart of the story, and it's getting closer and closer and closer, and keeping some characters away from the drama, right? The very environment itself embodies the conflict of that game. So I think space and dramatic storytelling are classic ways that we um, tell what's going on inside, and we show it visually, or we talk about it by pointing to it in literature, right? And we, I think we do the same thing in games. I'm not sure we're as careful in a lot of games. In a lot of games, things are there because they're cool and because we want players to go there. So we have like weenies on the horizon to drive players there. But it's only a very few games that are really good at using environmental storytelling to illuminate themes. I'm thinking of like Edith Finch, for example, I think does a great example of illuminating the themes of those short stories through the environment, right?
I feel like if you look at Bob's window, you can see in the very back is a poster for his game Bruckle.
Oh, yeah.
That is one of my favorite examples of a game that does absolutely brilliant spatial storytelling. I hope people have played that. Brandon.
Yeah, you're way too kind.
Brandon,
Hey,
you're
Tracy.
next up with
Hey,
a
Bob.
question.
Yeah. I think Brandon has a question.
Yeah, I just said that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Hey, Tracy. Thank you so much for the talk. I'm Brandon Lyman. I'm one of Bob's PhD students. I have been thinking a lot within the current like administration and things going around in politics. And I'm a PhD student. I'm building this skill set that could be used to do good in this world, right? And very recently, I've been sort of grappling with what are games doing now to help us, right? Like me spending all this time trying to make better games for people. When you mention that the democracy motivation of this, like we are making better citizens of democracy, I feel like empathy is something that is lacking, obviously, in this country, and that games can help build it. But I'm wondering if you have any idea what the time horizon is. Like, are there any heuristics to say that, like, oh, after, we released this book that had this potential effect on society, it started to manifest X amount of years out, something like that. I'm wondering the immediacy of this approach. Yeah, thank you for the time and for answering.
Boy, that's a tough question. I don't have any timelines for you. And I'll tell you what I think I struggle with exactly that too. Should I be making games at a time like this, right? And this book is part of my answer for myself, right? What I also know, and the sad part about it, is that I think it's easier to see how quickly evil spreads than how I think it takes longer and it takes more intention for good qualities to spread. And that's why I feel like we have to start with young people, and we start by teaching them it's okay to have these deep reactions and feelings to the media they're spending the majority of their time in, right? And I love Celia's story about Roblox at the dinner, talking about Roblox at the dinner table, because, I think for a lot of students, for example, a lot of my students from Asia, their parents think that games are evil, and they don't respect them talking about them because they're a waste of time, right? But what Celia said was that the adults were listening to a child talk about their deep experience in play, and that gives me heart, right? It's one person at one family dinner table, and I know that there's a much larger movement to say games are evil and they corrupt our minds. But we have to start one person at a time. And so we have to give that young person who's talks about Roblox in such a profound way, or the young person who talks about Journey in such a profound way. We have to give them their we have to give them their place to be heard, so that there's a way for that to multiply, right? Unfortunately, right now, we've squeezed all the air out of places for people to say good things, for people to say kind things. It's very difficult to say kind things in public right now, because you'll just be laughed at and destroyed. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And there's actually a part in the book where I talk about this. It's really important to me. I'm actually completely off of social media right now. I've taken down all my social media accounts because it's not a place for a humane person to be. But it is important that we speak in public in some way. So I still do things like this. Maybe you will be able to take it another step farther, and someone will take it another step farther, and it'll be more like a baton race.
This is incredibly helpful. Thank you so much.
We only have a couple minutes left. Chris had a comment about, Chris, did you want to, is there a way for you to briefly synopsize your comment here for Tracy to respond?
Yeah, of course. Oh, there we go. No. Video. Better. Yeah, so I mean, a couple of things. I spend a lot of time in my level design class trying to teach this kind of deep analysis of the spaces that games are in, right? How that reflects the narrative, what the meaning of those spaces are, how wrapping the gameplay and the narrative in a spatial design can add depth and add meaning. And it's new to a lot of the students coming into it, right? Like the idea that games have stories and if characters that they love is pervasive, but really stopping and thinking about both procedural rhetoric and architectural rhetoric isn't something that they've run into before. And it's wonderful that you've written the book, I guess, is my takeaway from that, that it will help drive that discussion and that understanding, because I spend a lot of cycles laying that foundation as opposed to developing the skills to do that further than I have a chance to. And you know, it's good that they're getting it in my class, but I would love it if that was something students came out of elementary school with and high school with, you know, before they even hit me.
Yeah, I think that would be, I mean, that's obviously what we're, trying to propose here, without being too didactic about what age group, because I also think this is open to all age groups, right? Uh, when we first started writing the book, we actually thought it was going to be a book for educators, but then we decided it was actually a book for everyone. So we opened it up, and it does still refer to education in it because it's important. But truthfully, I think everyone who plays games could stand to give themselves a bit more permission to think about what's happening in themselves as they play those games and why it's happening, right?
I guess the other half of it is that the second comment relates.
We're actually out of time.
Oh, sorry.
We're actually out of time.
Sure.
Okay.
Sorry to cut you off. Tracy, thank you so much for coming and joining us. It was a fantastic talk. I'm so glad we were able to record it. Nathalie, did you have any parting words for
No, we will announce the next speakers for January and February later. We are still working on the list of invited speakers, but check, our LinkedIn. That's where we make announcements, and the Games at Northeastern website also has links to upcoming events. Thank you everyone for attending. This was recorded, so it will be posted as well on the YouTube website. And thank you, Tracy. Amazing, super interesting talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming, and thanks Celia and Nathalie for inviting me.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. See you later. Bye.